Well, look, the riots in the 1960s, the 1968 riot in Washington, was an incredibly potent symbolic event. I mean, aside from the fact that it destroyed vast sections of the city, required the president to defend himself behind walls of machine guns and to bring in regular army troops to defend the Capitol. It also, arguably, I think very pretty clearly, sparked off rioting in other cities. And, all the major riots that occurred following King's assassination occurred after the Washington riots. The Washington riots began the night King was killed. It wasn't until a few days later that Chicago exploded, Baltimore, Kansas City, Pittsburgh, several dozen other cities that had major riot outbreaks. Not just going beyond just the small bits of violence, but real expressions of violence. And so I think that a lot of those might have happened without Washington, but Washington was the particular violence in Washington, the media attention there, and the fact that the president was right down the street, and the fact that it was an election year, the fact that Vietnam was already tearing the country apart and tearing Washington apart. I think that those things all came together on that night, on that Thursday night, and created a potent symbol for anyone who was looking for a way to express their rage in other parts of the country, and in a way sort of became an exported shelling incident, if you will, or sort of a catalyst for a shelling incident in those other towns. And so I think that the fact that it is in Washington, that we have had these new riots in Washington, is incredibly important. And the fact that, yes, we are in an election year, just like 1968. Nixon, after the election, after the riots, during the election season, used the fact that the riots were in Washington to great effect, and used it as a stunning indictment of not just the Johnson administration, but the whole liberal structure of government that had been in place, ever since Roosevelt came to power. So, you're looking at almost 40 years. And Nixon was able to look at the riots in Washington, to use images of the riots in Washington as a slap to the face of everyone who claimed that we have the right answer. And he said, no, you don't, because you have had riots in the nation's capital, and that should never happen. And the fact that it does proves that you have failed. And I think that it's obviously a different time. It's a different election. We have different issues aside from this, and so it remains to be seen exactly how these riots will affect the election. But I'd be very surprised if there wasn't a significant impact on national politics, setting aside whether or not the riots here could cause riots in other parts of the country. The riots here were not handled all that well, and they did create extensive damage. So I don't see why similar problems in similar cities, similar parts of cities around the country, couldn't experience mobs looking for the same answer.